Hello, and welcome to our speaker resource videos, brought to you by the TISHA Program Committee and Education Innovation Chair. Everyone coming to convention each year is excited to learn and to take home new knowledge, current research, and the best strategies, and they want to be able to use it all with their students, clients, or patients that next week. But how can all of you, our TISHA speakers, help them do that? As a speaker, it's important to have a goal for your talk. Luckily, you've already submitted learner objectives, so that's a great place to start. You can use your objectives to outline the sections of your talk. That way you'll make sure you cover each of the areas you need. But a more important goal for you as the speaker is to inspire, to encourage your listeners to take action. You're giving them tools and ideas, and now they need to go out and take the next steps. Information comes from textbooks or research articles, but their inspiration will come from you. Let's look at 4 steps you can take. Start by sharing something that your audience already knows about your topic. Connecting to background knowledge is the best way to approach new learning. Then, help them remember by connecting the new information to the old. Remember, our goal is to move them to action. We want them to use these new skills. The best time to do that is when the information is fresh, so there's no better time than right in your session. Check out our other speaker video for ways to help your listeners engage their senses and get involved in their own learning. And don't forget to use stories in your teaching. It's so much more engaging to hear about that patient that participated in your research study as you gathered every piece of your data, to learn about the relationship you built with the student you mentored, or to listen to your own journey learning a new skill with a case study. And if you've been successful, the hope is that your learners will be motivated to teach others and share their own stories too. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about how your slides can help engage your learners and help you avoid a death by PowerPoint situation. A good rule of thumb is to make your slide glanceable, like a billboard. Take this slide for instance. There's 1 point per slide, 1 picture per slide, and 1 phrase to make a point. Now this takes practice, and I know it can be hard to convert research data or clinical tutorials to this format, so we'll look at some examples in a minute. But first, let's learn some key tips. The first tip is to limit the amount of text. Think about the top 3 presentations you've ever attended. Were the speakers reading paragraphs of text off the slides to their audience? I bet they were dynamic, engaging with you as a learner, speaking from the heart. Your slides should be a visual support for the talk you're giving, not the talk itself. So short bullet points are best, with words or phrases instead of complete sentences, and keep it to just a few per slide. Also, use larger font sizes. For in-person presentations, you want to be sure that the people at the very back of the room can follow along, so use at least size 30. Now I know it's a scary idea to not have all your points right in front of you when speaking. You're nervous about presenting and you want to be sure you have something to fall back on. That's completely understandable. Luckily, we have you covered with the notes section in Presenter View. Keep your notes for each slide in PowerPoint, and your AV person will help you set up your view on the laptop in your presentation room so that you can see all your notes as you're going. Limiting the amount of text on your slide will encourage your audience to listen to you rather than just spending time reading what's on your slide. Another way to stay engaged is to use more color and font changes. When things catch our eye visually, it's easier for us to stay focused. You can change the background colors of your slides, highlight keywords with bold or colored fonts, or even make some words larger to stand out while you're making a point. I also love to use slide animations to my advantage, but it's easy to get carried away with them. A good rule of thumb is to think about how the animation serves your speaking style or the information you're trying to convey. What is the purpose for the animation? One way might be to highlight a point on the slide as you're talking so that it draws attention and adds emphasis. My favorite method is to add points as I go. I don't want to reveal too much at once because I want my listeners to be engaged with me rather than thinking ahead. I try to avoid adding animations just for the sake of it. They can just be a distraction. But if you really want to drive home a point, A single powerful image can do the trick. A good tip is to find large resolution images that you can fill to the edges of the slide so that they pop. Some photos have a lot of negative space where you can add text on top. The gray background in this photo would be considered the negative space, but there wasn't enough to add my heading, so instead I changed the slide background to be blue, a contrasting color. It can be tricky to find images that are free and licensed for your use. Google Images certainly has a lot of image choices, but they're not always of great quality, and most are not available for you to use under public domain licenses, and they would require permission and/or attribution. But here are a few websites that do have a lot of stock images to search that are free for you to use with or without attribution. Let's talk about SmartArt, a great tool within PowerPoint you can use to organize multiple pieces of information on your slide. First, you want to consider what information you have to include and determine what relationship the information has. Is it several steps in a list, like on this slide? Maybe it's two contrasting ideas, or a hierarchy that an organization chart or a pyramid would show best. There are lots of options, and you can customize each one with colors and shapes that fit best with your data set. The last thing I want to mention before we put all of this into practice is slide templates, like the one I'm using for this video. You can download them for free from websites like slidesgo.com or slidescarnival.com, and you can find nice professional slide decks that match your presentation style or content. They include a variety of slide layouts and graphics that you can customize as you need. This is the example template I used for this video. These are just one option to consider. You can also download the Tisha PowerPoint provided each year with the convention's theme. If you're presenting as a representative of your university or healthcare organization, they may have specific requirements for branding your slides as well. Finally, let's look at some real examples of putting this into practice. This is a slide from a presentation I did on auditory processing disorders. I think it was my first professional presentation ever. So many words on here. What would I change if I were giving this presentation today? First, I would move all these points down into the notes. They're great points that I want to keep. Then I might use a SmartArt graphic to highlight the two contrasting approaches. Something like this is much cleaner and illustrates the idea that there are two main approaches for treatment. I can chat about each one, and then maybe I want to emphasize which disciplines tend to focus on each one, so I'll animate these words in when I get to that point. Let's look at another example. This one, also mine, was from my first presentation on childhood apraxia of speech. This slide shared data from a study that wanted to determine if SLPs change the diagnostic features that they use to diagnose CAS after reading ASH's position statement in 2007. Now, it would probably take you a minute to look at this chart and make sense of all these numbers, and your attention would certainly be divided rather than focusing on my main point, which was, we have gotten better at diagnosing CAS, but we're not there yet. And this study suggested that we have a long road ahead of us. This image on this slide has a more powerful impact. It provides an emotional context for all the points I wanted to make about the work still to be done. So it's much more likely that my audience buys in, or maybe feels inspired to tell their friend about the session, and hopefully they remember this talk when that student or patient shows up next week. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you'll use a few of these tips in your own presentations. Remember that we have support for you during speaker support office hours, where you can log on to a Zoom call and get one-on-one help with PowerPoint tips, finding good images, using or even creating negative space in those images, or anything else you need help with. Check the Tisha Convention website for dates and times, and we can't wait to see you at convention.